What happens when an arrogant receptionist tries to humiliate a guest dressed simply in a luxurious New York hotel, without realizing that this woman is none other than Sandra Bullock, and even worse, she had no idea that Keanu Reeves was about to walk into that hotel and turn the tables in a way no one saw. Coming, you won't believe how this night ends. Before we continue this story, let us know where you are watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The rain-battered New York City that November night, turning the streets into shimmering mirrors reflecting the city's vibrant lights among the many hurried pedestrians shielding themselves. Under umbrellas, a woman walked alone, keeping the hood of her sweatshirt pulled low. To obscure part of her face, the black cap was discreet but intentional. It served as a barrier against curious gazes. Sandra Bullock took a deep breath as she approached the entrance of La Majesticone of the city's most exclusive hotels. Fatigue weighed on her shoulders, but her mind remained alert. She needed a safe retreat before an important event the next morning. Something that should be simple, but for someone like her, never was. As soon as she stepped through their revolving doors, the soft aroma of jasmine and vanilla filled her senses. The atmosphere exudes sophistication. Polished marble reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers, while a piano played softly in the background, a place for select clientele, and for those willing to pay for the luxury of discretion. Sandra made her way to the reception desk behind it. A young woman with impeccable posture and a meticulous gaze analyzed the arriving guests. Her name, Heather, was engraved on a golden name tag. Heather raised an eyebrow as Sandra approached. Her eyes scanned the woman from head to toe. Sweatshirt, simple G, comfortable sneakers, an outfit that didn't match the usual guests of La Majestic. "Good evening. How may I assist you?" The question came out, controlled, but there was a subtle hesitation, as if she were already judging the woman's presence there. Sandra Bullock kept her voice calm but firm. "I have a reservation under the name Sandra Annette." Heather hesitated briefly. The name didn't seem familiar. The receptionist typed the information into the system, her eyes scanning the screen with surgical precision. "Sandra Annette," she repeated, furrowing her brow. "We don't have any VI reservations under that name." The phrase rang an alert inside Sandra's mind. "Here we go." She maintained a discreet smile, already accustomed to this type of situation. "I can show you the reservation confirmation." She quickly pulled out her phone and opened the email, extending it toward Heather. But the receptionist didn't immediately look at the screen. Instead, she let out a small sigh and then picked up the phone as if preparing for something more important. Sandra noticed the subtle shift in the woman's expression. It was a look she knew all too well, the look of someone who judges. Foreknowing, Heather finally took the phone and glanced briefly at the screen. Her tone remained dry. "Oh, of course, let me check again." But there was something else in her voice, something laced with sarcasm. Sandra inhaled slowly, keeping her patience. She didn't want trouble. She just wanted her room. But she could already tell that Heather had built an invisible wall between them. As Heather typed into the system again, uncomfortable silence settled over the room across the lobby. A few guests began to notice the interaction. Nothing drew more attention than a moment filled with disguised tension. Sandra discreetly crossed her arms, waiting. She could already feel the weight of Heather's gaze now, deliberately avoiding eye contact. Then in a dry tone, Heather made a comment that would change everything. "This hotel is for exclusive clients. Perhaps there's been some mistake." The implied suggestion was clear. "Maybe you don't belong here." Sandra blinked slowly, absorbing the words. She was used to being recognized in airports, events, even inside stores, when she just wanted to grab a coffee. But at that moment, Heather had no idea who was standing before her, and maybe that was for the best, or maybe not. Little did Heather know the woman in front of her wasn't just any guest. She was someone whose name the entire world knew. Heather kept typing into the system. Her lips pursed, her expression forced, as if she were trying to solve a great mystery. But Sandra knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't a mistake. Heather didn't want to find their reservation. Sandra Annette, the receptionist repeated, tilting her head slightly. "I don't see any VIP reservations under that name." Her tone was polite, but there was something underneath it. Sandra understood exactly what it meant. She wasn't welcome here. She remained calm, even as irritation pressed against her ribs. The reservation was made weeks ago. I have the confirmation here. She unlocked her phone, pulled up the email, and held the screen toward Heather. The receptionist barely glanced at it before letting out a long sigh. Oh, of course, let me check again. Sandra noticed the discomfort grew. Heather wasn't following protocol she'd already decided. In that moment that Sandra didn't deserve to be treated as a valued guest, her fingers moved over the keyboard. But Sandra could tell from her expression she wasn't actually searching for anything. Miss Annette. Heather crossed her arms. Are you sure the reservation was made here at La Majestic? It wasn't a real question, it was an insult. Sandra felt the frustration build, but she kept her voice firm. I'm quite sure. Heather smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. Well, our system isn't showing any confirmation under your name, but I can recommend a more affordable hotel a few blocks from here. A slap in the face. Sandra didn't flinch, but the shift in the room was unmistakable. People were paying attention now. The couple by the fireplace had stopped talking. The man the bar lowered his drink, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Heather wasn't just denying the reservation, she was rejecting Sandra. The actress held their receptionist gaze for a moment, then looked around. The tension was thick in the air. Sandra kept her voice level, but there was steel beneath it. You didn't even check the system properly, did you? Heather blinked, briefly thrown off. I'm just following procedures, ma'am. If you'd like, you're welcome to wait while I verify again. Sandra could see exactly what she was doing. Heather was winning this game of power. Sandra took a slow breath. Is your manager available? Heather's smirk grew ever so slightly. He's busy, but I can try checking once more. She turned her monitor slightly as if she were actually looking something up, but Sandra caught the reflection in the glass behind the reception desk. The system was still on the home screen. Heather wasn't searching for anything. Irritation burned in Sandra's chest, but before she could react, a sound made her pause. The faint click of a camera shutter. Her gaze flicked to the bar where a man in a suit was holding his phone at chest level, pretending not to have just taken a photo. He recognized her, and if he recognized her, others would too. Sandra's heartbeat quickened. This wasn't just about a botched reservation anymore. This was about exposure. He noticed the shift in Sandra's expression, and her smirk grew. She sensed Sandra's vulnerability. Miss Annette, why don't you wait in the lounge while we sort this out? I'm sure we can find something for you. The humiliation was now complete before Sandra could respond. Another receptionist approached Heather and whispered something in her ear. Heather stiffened. Her gaze flicked from Sandra to the man at the bar and then back to Sandra's phone. She was starting to suspect, but before she could say another word, the hotel doors swung open with force. A cold gust of wind swept into the lobby, carrying raindrops. With it, Heather's head snapped toward the entrance. The security guard by the door straightened his stance. Every head in the room turned, and then he walked in, dressed in a tailored black suit and crisp white shirt, his shoes slightly damp from the rain. His presence shifted the energy of the entire room in an instant. His steps were deliberate, measured, unwavering. His eyes swept across the room, taking everything in within seconds. And then they found Sandra. The baseball cap still shadowed part of her face, but it didn't matter. The brief exchange of glances said everything. Heather swallowed hard. Sandra didn't have to say a word. The man strode directly toward her, ignoring everyone else. The lobby fell silent, and then with a soft, knowing smile, he spoke. Is everything good here? The impact of his words echoed through the space. Heather froze. She didn't need to ask who he was. Everyone knew his name hadn't been spoken. But Heather understood in that moment that she had just made a mistake she would never forget. Keanu took a deep breath, looked at Heather, and then did something no one in the room saw coming. The lobby of La Majestic was dead silent. The kind of silence thick with tension, where no one knew whether they should speak or just watch. Heather, who had held an air of complete control just moments ago, had lost her breath. The man standing in front of her was no ordinary guest. It was Keanu Reeves, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, crisp white shirt, and shoes still slightly damp from the rain. He exuded effortless elegance, a presence that shifted the energy of any room. But what truly made Heather freeze wasn't his name. It was the way he looked directly at Sandra. "Did I take too long?" he asked, his voice low, laced with subtle amusement. The words hit like a shockwave. Heather blinked, unable to process what she was seeing. The woman she had just dismissed, the one she humiliated. Minutes ago, Keanu Reeves was talking to her. With a familiarity that shattered Heather's assumptions, Sandra let out a slow breath, a small smile, forming, "Oh, you know how much I love a good patience test." Keanu's eyes sparkled with a knowing look. The lobby remained motionless, as if everyone had collectively stopped breathing. The power dynamic shifted in an instant. Heather, who had been so confident before, now stood frozen. Her face stiffened. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. And then it happened. Across the lobby near the fireplace, a couple exchanged stunned glances. Emily, a woman with brown hair tied into a casual bun, widened. "Here's David," she whispered, nudging her husband's arm. David, who had been watching with mild curiosity, frowned. What she looked directly at Sandra, then at Keanu. And then it clicked. "David, oh my God, I think it's her." David turned back to Sandra. Her baseball cap still shielded part of her face, but now it was obvious. David's breath hitched. "No way. What would she be doing here?" Emily swallowed hard, maybe trying to have a quiet night, and look how that turned out. She slowly shifted her gaze to Heather. Heather wasn't blinking, unsure of what to do, and that's when she realized it. The damage was already done. Sandra Bullock wasn't just any guest, and Heather had just treated her in the worst way possible at the bar. The same man who had secretly taken a photo earlier now held his phone again, hesitating. Should he take another picture, start recording? Because whatever was happening here was about to become a scandal. Heather straightened her posture. She tried to recover, but it was too late. Keanu's eyes, which had been calm before now, carried a different weight. "I believe my friend has a reservation here." His voice was still soft, but there was an undeniable authority beneath it. Heather swallowed hard. I, of course, sir, I can check." She started typing frantically. For real this time, each keystroke was a blow to her own ego, because now she was actually searching for the rest observation. Now she wanted to fix it, but it no longer mattered. The damage was done. Keanu crossed his arms, waiting patiently. Sandra said nothing. Her gaze stayed on Heather, but without anger. What she felt wasn't rage, it was exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes when you've experienced something so many times that it no longer surprises you. Heather finally found their observation. Relief flooded her as she quickly typed something and forced a smile. "Here it is." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but no one in the lobby believed her sudden change of heart. She turned the screen toward Sandra, her fingers trembling slightly. Yes, your reservation is here. Just a system error." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "Oh, a system error?" Heather turned red. Keanu, standing beside Sandra, let out a short, humorless chuckle. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed down the hall. That's when the hotel manager appeared. He looked pale, as if he already knew something was wrong. His eyes darted to Keanu Reeves, then to Sandra, and then to Heather. He didn't need to ask what happened. He already knew. The entire lobby waited for Keanu's reaction. Heather, desperate, tried to salvage the situation. "Mr. Reeves, I deeply apologize for any confusion." She forced a tight-lipped smile, turning towards Sandra. "Miss Annette, I want to assure you that your stay will be perfect." She was scrambling to redeem herself, but there was no redemption to be found, because when she looked back at Sandra, she saw something different. She saw the way everyone else was looking at. They're the couple by the fireplace, the man at the bar, the security guard at the entrance. They had all witnessed it. The humiliation couldn't be erased. And then Keanu took a deep breath. Heather flinched, and then he did something new and unexpected. Keanu took a deep breath, looked at Heather, and then did something no one in the room saw coming. The silence in the lobby of La Majestic was suffocating. Every pair of eyes was locked on Keanu Reeves. Heather, who just moments ago had complete control, now looked like a wax statue, unable to act. She didn't know what to do. The confidence she had just minutes ago shattered the moment Keanu stepped into the hotel. Sandra remained still beside him, her face calm, but her gaze said, Everything. Keanu let out a sigh, running a hand through his slightly damp hair from the rain. The lobby waited. The hotel manager, a man in a well-fitted navy suit, looked ready to faint. He understood the danger of the situation. The receptionist at the desk next to Heather had stopped typing and was now looking at her with a mix of pity and apprehension. Heather swallowed hard. She tried to regain her composure, forcing a nervous smile. Sir Gives, her voice came out higher pitched than she intended. I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. We're resolving everything. Sandra crossed her arms. Oh, now you're resolving it. Heather blinked rapidly. Yes, it was just a system error. You know how it is, these things happen. Sometimes. She let out a nervous laugh, but the sound died halfway through. No one laughed. Keanu didn't smile. The security guard by the door, who had been silently watching everything unfold, took a small step forward as if sensing what was about to happen. Keanu then shifted his stance. He uncrossed his arms slowly, his hands now resting on their reception desk right in front of Heather. His gaze, which had been friendly moments ago, turned sharp. Let me ask you something. His voice was calm, low, but ash-sharp as a blade. Heather straightened up, tense. Yes, sir. Keanu tilted his head slightly. With this system error have happened. If I hadn't arrived. Heather lost all color in her face. The words hung in the air, poisoned by the truth. The question hit hard because everyone in the lobby knew the answer. No, it wouldn't have happened. If Sandra had been alone, Heather never would have admitted the error. She would have dismissed her, sending her off to another hotel. Heather tried to find words. She tried to come up with any excuse that could get her out of this. But there was no escape. Keanu kept his gaze locked on her. His face remained calm, but there was no patience left in his eyes. The hotel manager finally stepped forward, taking control of the situation. Miss Bullock, Mr. Reeves, please. Allow me to express our deepest apologies. Heather turned to him, almost pleading for help, but the manager didn't even glance at her. He was only focused on Sandra and Keanu. This is not how we treat our guests, I assure you. This situation will be corrected immediately. Heather shrank even further. Keanu continued, watching her as if waiting for her to admit it herself. But Heather would never do that. She just stood there, heart-pounding, fists clenched tightly. Their sides. She wanted this moment to end, but Keanu wasn't going to make it easy for her. And what if it had been someone else, he asked, still looking at Heather. The manager gulped. Heather could feel the weight of every gaze in the room on her. Keanu's question was devastating. What if it had been someone who didn't have a recognizable name? Someone who wasn't famous? Would you have treated them the same way? Heather didn't answer, not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't, because everyone in that lobby knew the truth. She had no answer. Sandra sighed softly, breaking the silence. This happens all the time. Her voice was quiet but undeniably true. The manager bit his lip, clearly uncomfortable. He knew this situation wouldn't just go away. The hotel's reputation was on the line. Keanu straightened up again, turning his attention from Heather to the manager. Sandra should have been in a room 20 minutes ago. The manager nearly stumbled as he rushed to respond. Yes, of course. We're handling everything right away. Heather hurriedly typed something into the system, printing out the room keycards. She slid them across the desk, trying to keep her hand steady. Here. There. Sandra took them without saying a word, but Heather couldn't look away. She waited for Sandra to say something, maybe, and it's okay. Maybe these things happen. But it never came. Sandra didn't give her another second of attention. Heather no longer existed to her, and somehow that hurt more than anything Sandra could have said. Keanu picked up Sandra's small suitcase, ready to walk her to the elevator. The couple by the fireplace still watched. In silence. The man at the bar, the one who had taken the photo earlier, didn't take another one, because he knew the moment had already been immortalized. Sandra and Keanu walked together toward the elevator. All eyes followed them until the doors slid shut. When they did, Heather felt the weight of the entire night collapse on her shoulders. She had just made the biggest mistake of her career, and deep down she knew this wasn't over. Heather stood frozen at the reception desk, knowing that her name too would now be remembered, but for all the wrong reasons. Now Keanu Reeves takes full control of the scene. The power dynamic shifts completely. Heather realizes that her mistake is irreversible. Sandra and Keanu leave the lobby in silence, but the damage has already been done, and the biggest question now is what will happen to Heather. The LA Majestic lobby had never been so silent. Heather didn't move. She was still standing behind the reception desk, her fingers pressing into the polished wood so hard that her nails nearly left marks. What had just happened was spinning in her head like a storm. Sandra Bullock had said nothing. Keanu Reeves didn't need to raise his voice, but the impact was crushing. Heather felt the weight of every state. The guests, the lobby were looking at her differently now. Before she was there, receptionist of a luxury hotel, someone with authority over who checked in and who didn't. Now she was just the woman who tried to humiliate Sandra Bullock and failed miserably. The hotel manager, who had been trying to contain the disaster, finally took a deep breath and turned to Heather. His expression wasn't angry, it was worse. It was disappointment. "Heather, come with me now." She blinked, snapping back to reality. "Mr. Williams, I can explain." He raised his hand, cutting her off. "Not here in my office." The tension in the lobby thickened. Everyone knew what that meant. Heather tried to maintain her composure as she walked around the counter, but her heart was pounding so hard she could hear the blood rushing in her ears. She felt every set of eyes on her with each step toward the glass door leading to the hotel's administrative offices. Her shame grew when she stepped into the office. The air felt heavier. The manager closed the door behind them, exhaling sharply. Heather turned quickly, trying to take control of the conversation. "Mr. Williams, it was all just a misunderstanding. I really couldn't find the reservation in the system." The manager sat down, slowly resting his elbows on the desk. He kept his gaze locked on her. "Don't lie to me, Heather." Those words hit her like a punch to the gut. She opened her mouth, but no excuse came out because deep down she knew it was pointless. Will continued watching her, waiting for her to speak. When she didn't, he went on. "You mistreated a guest. For no reason, you deliberately delayed her check-in. You tried to humiliate a client who, as it turns out, is one of the most respected women in Hollywood." Heather lowered her head. The manager slammed his palm on the desk, making her flinch. "But the worst part, Heather, is that if Keanu Reeves hadn't shown up, you never would have fixed it." She swallowed hard. "Yes, that was the worst part." William sighed before leaning back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Do you know what happens next?" Heather didn't answer, but she already knew. The manager leaned forward. "The news is already spreading." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" He turned his monitor around and pulled up social media, a photo of the hotel lobby. The post's title: "The Majestic Receptionist Tries to Humiliate Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves Steps in to Shut It Down." Heather felt the air leave her lungs. She scrolled through the comments, reading in horror. "Wow, this happened today. The hotel must be ready to fire this woman. Keanu being Keanu, saving the day. As always, has she lost her job? Yet because honestly, after this, Heather's face went pale. This can't be happening." The manager kept his expression firm. "It happened, and now the hotel has to respond." He took a deep breath and without hesitation said the words Heather dreaded most. "You're fired." The impact was brutal. Heather felt a cold chill run down her spine. "What, Mr. Williams? No, I've dedicated years to La Majestic. This was just a mistake." He stood up, cutting her off. "A mistake, Heather? You weren't just rude to a guest. You tried to turn her away. You humiliated her." And what if it had been someone without a famous name? She couldn't answer. Williams pointed at the screen. "Lee, Majestic cannot be associated with this kind of scandal. Your termination is immediate." Heather felt the ground collapse beneath her. She wanted to speak, to beg, but it wouldn't change anything. Heather left the office with blurred vision. The walk to the hotel exit felt endless. She grabbed her things, her conscience weighing on her like never before. She crossed the lobby, avoiding the guests' gazes, but she knew. Everyone knew. When she finally reached the door, she paused for a second. The security guard watched her. He didn't say anything, but his expression said it all. She stepped outside onto the sidewalk. The rain was still falling, lightly, but Heather didn't bother to shield herself. She just kept walking without direction. She was no longer the receptionist of a luxury hotel. Now she was the example of what happens when you judge someone without knowing who they really are. And the world would never forget it. Hours later, back in the LA Majestic lobby, things had settled down. The front desk had changed shifts. The manager had given strict orders to ensure Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves received the best service possible. Emily, the woman who had recognized Sandra earlier, was still there talking with her husband. She shook her head in disbelief. "I bet Heather will never judge someone by their appearance again." David chuckled, taking a sip of his wine if she even gets another job anywhere. That is, Emily glanced toward the elevators where Esra and Keanu had disappeared hours ago. She'd no idea who she was dealing with. And that night, Heather learned the hard way that respect always comes before arrogance. Sandra Bullock sat at the edge of the massive king-size bed in her luxurious suite. The exhaustion from the trip was finally catching up to her, but the scene in the lobby was still vivid in her mind. She ran her fingers over the crisp white sheets, lost in thought. Across the room, Keanu stood by the window gazing at the illuminated city below. "She got what she deserved," he said without taking his eyes off the skyline. Sandra sighed, maybe, but what really bothers me isn't what she did to me. It's knowing that this happens to people all the time, people who don't have someone to show up and save them. Keanu turned to her, studying her face. She had a distant look, but it carried meaning. He sat down in the armchair across from her. You can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, right? Sandra gave a small smile. He smiled. "You probably don't remember, but when I was just another struggling actor, trying to make it, there was an event, a party. One of those places, full of important people. You were one of the only ones who stopped to talk to me. Like I was someone who mattered." Sandra was silent. She tried to pull the memory from her mind, but she couldn't recall that specific moment. But that didn't mean it wasn't true because that was exactly the kind of thing she would do. She swallowed, touched by his words. Keanu gave her a soft smile. Maybe now it was my turn to return the favor. The next morning when Sandra and Keanu came down to the lobby, the energy was different. There was a cautious silence among the staff. The hotel manager hurried over, smiling nervously. "Mr. Reeves, Miss Bullock, on behalf of Lee Majestic, I would like to offer you a complimentary stay and a special dinner as an apology for what happened." Sandra just smiled politely. She picked up her suitcase and glanced briefly at Keanu. "We appreciate the offer, Mr. Williams, but I think this time we won't be staying any longer." The manager forced a smile, but this discomfort was evident. Keanu picked up his own luggage and followed Sandra toward the exit. As they passed through the lobby, some staff members lowered their heads discreetly. The car carrying Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves glided smoothly through the streets of New York. The LA Majestic Hotel was now far behind them. Sandra gave a small smile. "And Heather, do you think she learned anything?" Keanu sighed, resting his arm on the back of the seat. "She had a choice: learn from it or drown in her pride." "It's up to her," Sandra let out a soft laugh. "Do you always have this Zen view of things?" Keanu shrugged. "I've seen a lot in this life. I know that some people never change, but others just need a shock to see the world differently." In the car, as Sandra and Keanu continued their trip, Sandra's phone buzzed. She picked it up and saw a message from a friend. A video. Chandra gave a small smile. Keanu looked over, curious. "What is it?" She shook her head, still smiling. "Nothing, just a little seed being planted." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "See, I told you it would make a difference." If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart.